You're listening to the Empowering Process podcast with your host, Gail Kraft. Listen as she holds frank discussions around how your purpose, being present, and trusting your power impacts your life. Whether you're an entrepreneur, leader, or developing your vision, you'll find wisdom and insights you can utilize right now. Welcome your host, Gail Kraft.
Well, hello there, everybody. This is Gail Kraft of the Empowering Process podcast, and I have with me yet another remarkable guest, and this is Kuti Mack. He is a man who was very successful in the music industry and decided to change to coaching for personal health. So that's personal training, nutrition, and things of that nature. And you can't do that without also being a personal coach. And so we're going to talk about what his life was like as a young child and how those experiences actually prepared him to be a successful entrepreneur and gave him the tools he needs in order to pivot and to adjust, as we all have to, in order to be able to achieve our goals. I don't want to say successful because that's defined differently for everybody, but to achieve our goals. So Kuti, thank you for being brave enough to join me.
Thanks for having me.
So my headset keeps falling off. I'll fix that in a second. We're going to talk a lot, actually, about what it's like to live in the sea of prejudice before you're even prepared for it, right? You come from England. That's where you were born, though you don't have your English accent anymore. I think you said at the age of 7, you moved over here, and your father was from Nigeria.
Yeah, father's from Nigeria. Mother's of Nigerian descent. A lot of her family's in the UK. She was in school in the UK, so I was born in the UK while my dad was setting up shop here. I came a little bit younger than that, but I lost my accent when I was 7.
Oh, that's what.
Yeah, and what I was told, and it seems to hold true, is the accent that you have when you're 12 is the accent that you have. So
I will discount that in a moment. Though I will slide back
internationally speaking. I can't speak for whatever
okay, American dialect. Okay.
American.
Okay. That may be
watch the news long enough, you might change how you talk here.
That's true. So you grew up in a very unusual manner. And I want to touch base just a little bit about the shock, at least to me, of prejudice when you're not prepared for it. And then I would like you to share your story. So I'm of Jewish descent, and I grew up actually as a street kid and part of a gang, and we were everything. There was no differentiation between religion, between color, whatever. We were just the gang, right? Smith Street gang. And at the age of 16, I moved away from my parents and moved in with my brother, who lived in the suburbs. And for the first time, I lived in a single family home. So I grew up in apartment living. And for the first time, experienced prejudice, where a boy I was dating's mother did not want him dating me. And I was shocked. I didn't know what to make of it. And I looked at him and I said, "Oh, just tell your mom we're not getting married. She can relax." Right. We're just having fun. Just tell her to relax. Right. And so I started to get curious about what is this thing all about? And you were way younger than me when you had your first unprepared for shock experience. So let's talk about being a child from the UK and what that was like, and then you moving here and what your experience was like here.
Yeah, what I recall quite well about me in the UK was, and this is in a lot of the world. It's not to say that discrimination and prejudices don't exist, but the battle lines can't be simply drawn on color in most instances. That's a very lazy way to do it, just because culturally speaking, the color of your skin doesn't connotate much,
Right.
So, and in some even very urban areas of America, like say New York City, to say the Black person, what does that mean? You could be Haitian, you could be Cuban, you could be Dominican, you could be Jamaican, you could be, Trinidadian, you could be
On
African
and
American, you
on,
could be
right?
whatever, you could be Nigerian, you can be Ethiopian. So color was never something that I mean, you were aware because you could see, but it was not something that was brought up as a line of demarcation. And furthermore, I'll say this, my mother was a nurse, is a nurse, and was studying nursing. And nurses are just different people. Nurses don't really, at least most of them don't have the time to be going through, well, this person's this color, so I can't do this with them. So nurses just is someone who would choose to take care of people for a living in that regard, in that intimate of a setting. You already kind of have a certain moxie about you and a certain, dare I say, empathy about you. So as a youngster, I'm growing up amongst nurses. So every face I see I remember when I was recounting to my mother early childhood memories, I thought that I was in a monastery because in my head, I thought I saw women in uniform that were all just super kind and nice and looked like cherubim, and but they were nurses. That's what it was. What she was like, no, those weren't nuns, those were nurses. And I was like, okay, now it makes sense. So I think it's because when I came here, I was going to a bunch of Catholic schools, so I just had that kind of association. But all that said, coming here, I never felt othered till I came here. And when I came here, I moved to a very multi-culti neighborhood. But the interesting thing was, I would say the first time I was othered, it was by Black people, because I had an accent. So I had a Nigerian name, Kuti, and I had a British accent, and it was just too a bridge too far to cross for these kids to really get with. So I think that they presumed, because on site I looked like them, that I should talk a certain way, behave a certain way, think a certain way, have a certain name. And I had none of those things. So the one thing we had in common was skin color, but that was the last thing that they saw. Everything else is what they saw. They saw my parents, they heard their accents, they said they heard my name, they heard my accent. So I remember that first just being strange to me, because I was seeing people that looked like me, and they were like, okay, you're not us. And then I knew my babysitters, all my babysitters were Cuban in the States. So obviously we were different, but they were caregivers. So again, in that situation, there was this level of affinity there. And I meant to ask you, when you were telling your story, so with your gang, what was the line of affinity for you all?
Location.
So just your geographic, just turf?
Just location, and that's the gang that we hung out with, and we were not to hang out with any other gang. I will tell you, I had a boyfriend that was not in that gang, and they wanted to know where he was and who he was, and I did not tell them.
Got it.
Right.
Got it. Yeah. So coming here, one of the things I remembered, communication and language is a very intimate connection. If you go anywhere and you try to speak to them in their tongue, it already shows some kind of regard that you have. If you think about, even now, if you go somewhere and you just try to speak whatever, Brazilian Portuguese while you're in Brazil, or French while you're in Montreal. Well, that's not a good example, because they can be sort of snotty about it. But if you try, in most cases, people will go, oh, this person's trying to meet me where I am.
Right.
So when I come to this country, the interesting thing is, I came from a country that spoke English. Americans speak American. They don't speak English.
There is a difference.
There's a huge difference. And now King's English, but Queen's English and American English are two different things. So I would hear all these words that I actually recognized. Not even like they were these weird words that I actually recognized, but they did not mean what I had been raised to understand those words to mean. So I had to learn English over again. And that was strange because learning French or Spanish, it's there are different, dog is a different word in Spanish, it's a different word in French. But to say pavement and it mean one thing over here and mean something different over there, that was difficult while you're trying to learn, period.
Seriously, we have slanged and bastardized so many words here in the US. Yes.
And that's fair. The United States is a different country. It should have a different language. It's interesting to me just thinking existentially about how vast the influence of imperialism is, where one doesn't think that you're smart unless you speak English, when English isn't even most of the world's native tongue.
Right. And that is so true.
That
could be a whole other podcast.
That's a whole nother discussion. But anyway, so coming here with Queen's English and a British accent, I think Roots had just come out for anybody that's, old enough to remember that. And it was like a very, that was a seismic pop culture phenomenon, and everybody was glued to the TV, and there was the main protagonist's name was Kunta Kinte, and I came here with my name Kuti, and that already had all kinds of just mess coming my way. And it was interesting to just step out of the then apartment and just get hit with all this shrapnel, this cultural shrapnel, and then come back home and be reminded on either side of that door, yeah, we are not them and they are not us. Not even in an adversarial way, but at least from the inside out. But going out there, it felt very adversarial.
So you were one person, you learned to be one person when you were home with the family, and put on a archetype when you walked out the door.
I ultimately had to, because as a kid, I wasn't used to being bombarded with all this stuff. I didn't feel like I deserved it. I stepped into the game wanting just to be cool with everybody, and I still feel that way now. When I meet people, I want to get down with them and be like, hey, where do we meet eye to eye? And so when I was getting that opposition, then I just got defensive. So while I did well in school because I was and hopefully still am smart, when we got out of recess and it was the social aspect of school, I was fighting every single day for the first 2 years I was here. And so going to a private school, coming home to a disciplinarian of a father, and having that report always come back that, he was fighting, meant that I was getting in trouble at home. And I never said why, but I think at some point around the second grade, I remember the teacher just really liked me. Sister Patricia really liked me, and she didn't understand why I was causing so much havoc at recess, but was a church mouse in class and doing well. So she stopped long enough to ask the question, but pulled my mother in on that. So she pulled the mother, vice principal, and myself. We all sat in the room, and she says, I don't get it. Like, I don't understand why this kid is doing this, and I'm concerned. So all eyes on me, and they asked me the question. And I'm saying simply, I don't understand why everybody's messing with me. I just want to play. I want to play kickball and tag like everybody else. And somehow it always comes up, and I've got to defend myself. Mm-hmm. So once I said that, my mother says, oh, I get that. I understand that. That had never been brought up in the 2 years we've been here. That had never been brought up as a problem. So now that my mother says she understands, what my mother says, which is really cool on one end, was, okay, if this is what's going on, then what I'm telling you in front of your principal, in front of your teacher, is that should you get into another one of these kind of altercations, I've got your back. And I'll have your back the best I can at home, but I cannot guarantee that your father will see things the way I do. True. So if you get in trouble here, I'll do my best to defend you, but I can't promise you won't get punished. So you can either keep doing what you're doing, or talk like these kids.
In other words, throw in the towel and blend.
Assimilate.
Yeah. Which is kind of what we do.
Code switch.
Yeah.
And accent gone immediately. sounded like a kid from, Northwest Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And and without even realizing it, that put an indelible mark on just the way I processed life from that point forward, because I was always cognizant of when I was other. I was cognizant of how that other moved, especially socially speaking. I was cognizant of how in this country categorization is ultimately everything. Everything's got to be standardized and formatted and categorized and classified. And if you check these boxes, it means that this is who you are. Now, less traumatically, what I also remembered was I had to take a bunch of standardized tests to figure out where I was academically.
Right.
And so I'm taking these tests. They don't seem that hard to me because they weren't. So all of a sudden I'm told, and even when I'm not told, I hear it around me. He's talented, he's gifted, he's smart, he's got a high IQ.
But that set you aside.
Before I even knew what that meant, I just knew, okay, it seems like they like the fact that I'm in this advanced class.
Right.
I'm talented and gifted. I'm smart. So I moved with that confidence as well. Academically, I was never threatened by anything. I never had to work hard in school because it just came to me naturally.
Right.
So honestly, when I got to college, that worked against me, because when the academic level ratcheted up, I had no study skills.
I was going to say you didn't know how to study.
I didn't know how to study. I'd be sitting there reading and stuff, and I'm like in the library with everybody else, trying to, okay, something magical happened in this room. Like, I'm just reading the books, waiting for something to happen, where everybody's studying and cramming, and I'm just sitting there like, I don't get it, So in that, all those things informed the way I'm seeing everything and how I moved academically, how I picked the schools I went to, how I picked the courses I took. Okay, if I have these activities, and that means that this school will take me. If I do this on paper, if I get this SAT score, then I'll get that. I've always been cognizant of that, from that point forward, from a kid forward. So those things and those things are things that branded me early in terms of how I move. And words now like code switch and things of that nature come up, but I just knew them to be survival mechanism.
Right. Exactly. And that's really, really kind of interesting. I have a keynote that I do, which is crafting the flow formula. And it's how leaders can get into flow and get their teams into flow. And when I was in corporate, that was my key to success. But I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew that I did not go to college. And I found myself a manager of a very prestigious firm.
Mm.
And I did things completely, I would call it street smarts, just from my gut.
Yeah.
Right. Does this feel right? Yes. And I'm going to go do it. And it was always right because I trusted my instinct.
Yeah, it took time. I'd still even say there's some residue where I still don't trust my instincts, because I'm always so measured in, okay, what does this person think about that? How will this person perceive this? How does this read to that person? Will this correlate? So I would definitely say that people in my life could argue, man, he counts his steps way too much. Not as much today, right now, but I mean, I'm 50, going on 51 now, so it's a long time to figure out, oh, just trust your gut.
Well, it's not that simple because the key is what is your subconscious mind or your instinct versus your ego,
Right.
right? Feeling what the difference is. So you have had a world, an experience of navigating to, and that the word avatar comes into my mind. You have been an avatar your whole entire life.
Oh, precisely. And then I've been also keenly aware of how that avatar reads, given whatever the circumstances. It's never lost on me how many times the school that I went to, in terms of going to the University of Virginia, when I bring that up, depending on the setting, it shifts everything. Oh, you went to UV. Oh, okay. Or somebody finds out that I'm not African American. You know, that you know, I came from the UK. I'm of Nigerian descent. I sometimes I've had conversations where when I say that, the person on the other end goes, I knew there was something different about you.
You don't come from a family of suffering.
Yeah, or whatever, or you know, whatever
Whatever.
it might be. You know, I knew something was a little different about you. And sometimes how to read that even, you know, it could be like, well, what did you think? Or what were you know, what low expectations or alternate expectations did you have of me? You know, or oh, that's why you move around here like such and such and such and such, because you do, you know, you don't come from this or you came from that. So that's how you know. So it's an interesting thing. And there are times where I've definitely played to that, you know, like, okay, I know this cat thinks I'm this way. So let me just lullaby him or her over here and then just drop this on them and they go, oh wow.
Wow.
So it's I've manipulated it at times, you know. I can't lie. It's been a part of my arsenal in terms of navigating certain circumstances and rooms.
Well, I would say that a good portion of my corporate life was definitely playing the avatar. I was the perfect corporate manager. I was the
Mhm.
perfect middleman. You know, whatever corporate said we had to do, even if I disagreed, I could make it happen. I could manipulate. And it is management is manipulation, the
Mhm.
team
Mhm.
into performing to where it is that we wanted to go.
Right.
It didn't fit with me on my values level. And so I frequently would get the company to a certain point and then leave.
Mm.
Right. It's like, okay, I got you where you want to be. Now I'm done. I'm
Got
going
it.
someplace else. Until I discovered who I am. And, you know, I think that that is probably the journey that you're on right now is you have changed and been a chameleon so many times that what's underneath the chameleon probably wants to come up, because I know that's what happened to me. The Gail that has been, that I would think nobody knows who I really am,
Mm.
because they didn't, right? And life circumstances taught you how to be that way, as it teaches everybody. Guys, if you don't think that you're an avatar, take a look at the things that you do because of the situations that you're in, because that's what an avatar is, right? um so what does this mean for you next? I know for your business, let's talk about your business, how you started off in the radio business and successful, and then how you got to where you are now, and how that past of yours allowed you to kind of pivot and shift.
Yeah, so the music business is my professional foundation. Personally, music has always been part of my life. Like my earliest memories always have music associated with them, whether I was listening to it, trying to play it. Uh, I love music. Music is the thing that is the soundtrack to our lives, but specifically my life. I can count years, but I know what was out every single year that I was cognizant of music. So um, turning that passion into a career, you know, I was very fortunate to be able to make that happen right out of college. Actually, while I was still in college, and kind of just flipped it into a career. And so working in the music business, it's it's a very volatile business. It's a business that's got a lot of subjectivity to it. You know, it's not while it tries to be a meritocracy, there's so, you know, I could tell you my favorite artist is, and you might be like, oh, he sucks, but I like Boom. And I'll be like, she's okay.
Yeah.
But I can't change how important that artist is to you or how important, you know, Prince may be to me. So with that, the subjectivity and then working professionally in that and trading in that and trading in people's opinions and trying to get, okay, look, I've got this new Outkast record and you've got to play it, or I've got this new Whitney Houston record, you've got to play it. I've got, you know, and getting people to go, I don't like that song, but it's my job to make sure they do, and then get the records to sell and all that kind of stuff. You know, you are always on your toes, and the charts are week to week. You know, every week there's a new chart. So
Right.
every week you've got a new evaluation as to how you are doing, both as an executive and as a brand and a company. So so there's never a dull moment. There's never a time you can just really coast. And if you're coasting, you were in trouble because it means
Right.
that, you're not selling records. So not even knowing it unwittingly, that prepared me for entrepreneurship because there was just always something happening, something new, some twist and turn, some fire to put out, some excellence to sustain. There was always something that you were gunning for. No matter what you did this week, it didn't matter because next week you had a new chart.
Right.
So
And your audience changes.
yeah, and audience changes. Sometimes, you see it. There'll be an artist that's hot for 2 years, and all of a sudden they disappear. The audience
Right.
just says, we don't care about them anymore.
Right.
They're old, they're played out, we're tired of them. And you've got to figure out ways to sustain those careers if you can, or start up new ones. Go with the trends. Technology, definitely. Digital technology was a seismic shift. I mean, I always tell people that's probably the latest industrial revolution that we've seen in our generation is just digital technology.
Right.
The music business was the first ecosystem I feel that got really disrupted by it.
Yeah.
Other people, it's kind of, oh, that's cute, digital stuff. But with music, when people just started going, okay, instead of buying a CD where the record companies had all of the power in terms of who was listening to what, when, how you were exposed to music, how you had access to it, how you had access to the best quality of it. That all switched, and all of a sudden the rabbit got the gun, and people just could send songs on their computers. And people were getting songs before we were even getting. People were getting songs out of the studio on a digital file before we, as the record companies, even knew these songs existed. So now all of a sudden we're chasing, whereas we used to be the leader in the industry. Music industry was built on certain pillars that were almost impossible to reverse. So it was a dinosaur of an industry that did not respond well to change at all. I mean, if you go back to, I don't even want to bore people with it, but if you go back to the late CD era when they were trying to do anti-piracy, and they started putting out, and they made CDs impossible to play. You couldn't put them in your computer because they would jack them up because they were afraid you were going to download them, and just trying to fight against stuff like Napster and iTunes. iTunes actually was the saving grace, to be honest. When Steve Jobs came up with iTunes and just said, okay, we'll sell these songs song by song, which was sort of the 1950s, the early pop music model.
Right. Where you get your singles. Yeah.
So it went from 45s to MP3s, but the music business was not interested in that because aggregate sales for us were album sales. That used to be the biggest way to make money. Sell an album, and CDs had inflated the price to $20-some for a CD. So now if somebody bought one album, that was a $20 hit right then and there, as opposed to
versus 99 cents.
Exactly. So the industry was not trying to give that up, but at some point it just cracked and they had to.
Right.
So I'm saying that the industry went through its recession and economic downturn 10 years before America did. 10 years before America's housing crisis in the late 2000s.
Right.
1999, 2000, 2001. We went through all of that. So all the attrition that came from that, the contraction that came from that, the job losses that came from that, the whole economic system was just crumbling. CDs were no longer a thing. And so having to navigate that and then see the country start to go through it, it was an interesting thing because for me, it was, oh, I've seen this before. How do we adapt? And so that pivot starts to kick in.
Right. What's interesting is around that same time, I have a few folks that I've interviewed went through the dot-com thing was crashing at the same time the music industry was going through this more.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Right. So money was like, the economy was doing fine, but certain businesses were really struggling to keep up.
Right, because you either couldn't keep up or the business was built up on something that really had no foundation.
Right.
And to be honest, the ethics of the music business were bereft. So when you really looked at it and saw what was going on, the digital era just pulled the blinds off of all of that. It pulled the cover on the Wizard of Oz, and it was just kind of like, oops.
Right. Pay no attention to.
Yeah, and everything just dropped. So now the industry is a different paradigm than it was back then. And I found myself I found myself, it started to feel like work. It went from being this thing where I just went straight from college and the lifestyle of being someone who enjoyed music to also being a purveyor of that same music and even those same artists that I was a fan of. And also now I'm running side by side with them. And then it just changed. And again, the industry is not a meritocracy. So it wasn't just that, okay, we're going to keep all the best and brightest.
No.
That's not how it works. Not to say that people who are in the business now aren't good and talented. I still have very dear friends who are indeed excellent at what they do. So let me say that. But there was a bunch of people that just got lucky.
Oh, sure.
There are a bunch of people
Absolutely.
who just had good favor, just got lucky, and some people who were unlucky.
Right.
And so I know a lot of great executives that just found themselves on the outside of the door and never found their way back in. Fortunately for me, I always, even to this very second, can maintain at least a pinky toe in the business one way or the other. I've got good favor with a lot of people. So sometimes people will consult with me, for career advice. I was doing management up until about maybe 5.5 years ago. So I've always maintained, some connectivity to and now I even, lecture about the music business. So in that regard, as a historian and as a sponsor of the next generation of executives and people who are and artists, I open myself up gladly to anybody who's serious about that and try to do my best to set the table for the future of the business to be something that understands the past, but also makes the industry even better moving forward.
Exactly. Now, then you had a friend come up to you and say, hey, you keep yourself in pretty good shape. You probably could make some money off of this.
Yeah. When I was in one of those moments where, I was part of a management team with an artist and we had maxed out this artist's opportunities and we were trying to negotiate new ones. And those negotiations became very protracted. So the thing with management is if you're not moving, if the artist isn't moving and earning, then there's nothing to get a percentage of.
Right.
So once we've maxed out everything, we're all just kind of sitting still.
Right.
And while we're sitting still trying to negotiate the next deal, what I always did, anytime I felt economically insecure in this country, two things I learned that'll make sure that you go broke fast are getting sued or getting sick.
Yeah.
So healthcare in this country, man. So I'm like, okay, so anytime I would feel like my money's getting tight, the first thing I do, I figure I keep my nose clean, so I'm not gonna get sued, but I cannot get sick. So the first thing I do is just rededicate myself to my health and my fitness. That way I don't have to worry about that. And this time, like you said, I was working out like a demon. I was working out just on my fitness regimen. And to your point, people would just start to know me as, oh, that's that fit guy, that's that fit guy. Yeah. And so when my friends would have people who were trying to get in shape, they would say, hey, I don't know, but I know that guy, he's in great shape. So maybe go ask him. And go ask him turned out, and I was always working out by myself. So go ask him turned out into, well, I didn't see myself as a fitness pro per se. I just had been athletically inclined since I was 7 or 8 years old. That was actually when I asked you about your line of affinity with your gang.
Right.
The thing that was my line of affinity as a youth was athletics.
Yeah.
Because I knew if I could beat you in a race, no matter what you thought about me, no matter how you try to poke fun at me, if I beat you competitively in something athletic, there's a winner and a loser in sports.
Period.
So if I beat you, all you can say is, man, Kuti's fast.
Yeah.
Man, Kuti scored more goals than anybody else. Man, Kuti's stronger than me. So those are the things that was my thing that I used to make friends and then you team sports. Now you're all collaborating towards the goal of winning, or you lose together. But it's together. So now I'm getting teammates, and that's how I built up a lot of my early friendships was through sports. Mm-hmm. So that carried all the way through my life. So friends are what, so I was working out by myself, but I always wanted to work out with people. So if somebody said, hey, can you work out with me? Sure. I'd just bring them with me. I wasn't training them in my mind. I was just doing what worked for me and showing it to them. This is what I do. You can try it.
Give it a shot.
But even in doing that, people were getting results. I started getting popular within my own social circles. So I might go to the gym any given morning with 3-4 people in tow. we all go to the gym, we're working out, and everybody's following my lead. So what starts happening is trainers are looking at me in the gym and going, hey man, you're not a trainer here and you can't train here. And I innocently say, I'm not.
I'm not getting any money. I'm not training.
I'm just working out. These are my workout buddies. I'm just working out with them. And then finally, a guy that I went to college with, who happened to be a trainer at one of these gyms that I had a membership to, he pulls me aside. He's just talking to me one morning. The gym was kind of empty. I was working out by myself. And he says, man, everybody in our meetings, talks about you. And I was like, what did I do? He says, everybody talks about how you're training in here. And I said, I'm not training in here. And he said, you're not? And I was like, no. I was like, why would I do that? Because in my mind, trainers didn't make any money. So
Right.
I was like, I come from selling platinum records. I was like, oh, man, I'm doing that lifeguard stuff, man. And he goes, well, you should be. You should be training. And I was like, get out of here, man. I was like, whatever. He's like, no, you should. And then I had another friend who I went to UVA with who's also in music. My man Frank, and we were just chopping it up about something. It might even been about music. And so he wanted to talk to me about some stuff, pick my brain. So we're doing lunch. And as we're talking, I remembered, and he was a good looking guy in great shape. And we're talking, and I said, aren't you doing some like that training stuff too? He says, yeah, man. He's talking about, man, I'm killing it. And he was training affluent kids who were prepping to try to play collegiate sports and things of that nature. So he found a niche. And he said he was doing very well with it. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. And at the time, I had started studying holistic nutrition because my dad had gotten sick and I wanted to just help him get better. And I knew my dad was active, but I knew his eating habits I couldn't really vouch for. So and when you start learning anything good that's real and true, the first thing you want to do is tell it. So I was like, yeah, you do that stuff, man. Check this out. Did you know if you eat this and this and this, you can do this, that, and the third? And I'm telling him all this stuff, and he's kind of impressed. He's like, wow, man. And he says, us sitting at this table right now, if somebody walked up to us right now and wanted to become a trainer, wanted to have a trainer rather, and he started asking us questions on site and based off of exercise, it would be a dead heat. And this is him telling me this as a successful trainer. He says, but the second you start talking all that nutrition stuff you're talking, I would just fade out the picture.
Drop the mic. Yep.
And I was sitting there looking at him, for real? He was like, yeah, man. And he was doing well. And that's when the light went off. I was like, okay, this music management thing is here, but it's hitting a wall. This is the second person who I know and trust that's told me I should be a trainer. And even then I was still skeptical. And he said, man, because again, the immigrant in me, the person who understands America in terms of systems and categorizations and being backed by certifications and diplomas and degrees, I said, well, I wouldn't just be some rogue trainer. I'd have to, if I was going to be a trainer, I'd have to get like a degree or a certification or something. And I honestly I did the academic thing. I did it well. Graduated from UVA. Hey, look, I've done that. That box was checked. I did not feel like going back to school.
Right.
And he said, no, you can get a good certification. You can get a legit certification. You just need to study for it. And I was like, I don't even feel like studying for it. Plus, I don't feel like going through all that stuff. He said, dude, you already know this stuff. You just need to know the language. Once you understand the language, then you'll realize you already understand this stuff. You just need to speak it in their language, which brings us back to what I was talking about when I first came to the country. I came here speaking English, listening to all these people say all these words that I thought I didn't understand, but had some familiarity with the actual words they were using. And then once I started realizing, oh, you're saying sidewalk, you mean pavement. Or when you say Band-Aid, you mean plaster. Or when you say cookie, you're talking about a biscuit. When you say bathroom, you actually mean the loo. Oh, okay, the trash can, that's the dustbin. Okay, I get it. And so it's the same thing. And sure enough, as soon as I made that connection, that test was supposed to take like 5 hours. I crushed it in like 2.5. I finished it so fast, I was scared. I thought I did something wrong. So everybody was still pouring away, and I was done. And I said, man, I messed this up. I probably failed this one. And I came back, I had gotten like 98% of it correct. Like I crushed the test. And once I got that, it was off to the races. I was a personal trainer, officially certified, the whole nine.
And then there's no looking back at this point.
No.
So your experience, I always look at how my challenges in my life have given me the opportunity to either wallow in them
Mhm.
and play the victim, or catapult me forward into being something different. And all of these experiences that I've had, good, bad, or indifference, and those are just labels, um, have really given me the opportunity to see life from a perspective that most people don't.
Yeah, I think it's about understanding what the steps are and really considering your own history. I was telling a client this just yesterday. It's not, it's okay to get upset. It's okay to get set back. It's okay to express sadness, cry, be frustrated. That is okay. These are human emotions that we are equipped with for a reason,
Right.
right? The problem is when we get stuck. And I'd be the first one to admit, I used to get stuck a lot. Almost got stuck last week. But thankfully, I've taken a lot of the lessons that I've learned all the way up through last week and said, hey, look, let's reframe this. Let's understand what this is. Because I tell people this as often as I can, and I'll say it here. When you think about the worst thing, like a lot of times people are in situations and it just seems insurmountable. And I tell them, I say, I challenge everyone just to stop for a second and think about the worst thing that has ever happened to you. You don't have to say it out loud. You don't have to message it, anything. Just think about it and own it for a second. Just have that thought. The worst thing that's ever happened to you today. Now, the fact that you could think of it, whatever it was, no matter how horrible it was, the fact that you can think of it means one of two things unequivocally. Either A, it's behind you, or B, you are currently enduring it. You are surviving it as you hear my voice. If that doesn't give you power when you really think about it, when the newest thing comes up, think about it one more time. The worst thing that ever happened to you, you can remember it. The fact that you can remember it means that it did not kill you.
Right.
And depending on what you believe in terms of spirituality, the cosmos, killing you might not be the worst thing. If you get what I'm saying, I don't want to be.
I do get what you're saying.
I'm not advocating you everybody just off themselves, but you get what I'm saying. So depending on what you believe spiritually. So what I'm saying is that when I remember that, what it is, okay, so that emotion kicks in, don't get stuck there. Matter of fact, as powerful, this is how powerful our minds are. Our minds are so powerful that they will have us look with dread upon certain situations. Think about that test. I was just talking about my test. I don't want to take the test. Why? Because that means I got to study. And I got to study. If a test is 5 hours, how many questions is that? If it's that many, if it's hundreds of questions, that means I got to study how many books? And I have all this. But if I spent just half of that energy going, man, you passed this test, and you're going to be sitting on podcasts with Gail. You're going to be doing TV interviews. You're going to have independence. You're going to have your own schedule. You can be there anytime you want to for your kid because you're dictating your schedule while you're helping other people's lives get better, while you're helping other people be their best. Think about just for sitting down for 2.5 hours of a test. Same situation.
Right.
But just a different way to look at it, different perspective.
Perspective is absolutely
everything. So what I'm committing myself to newly committing myself to is thinking about the best that can happen. What's the best that can happen? And I'm not trying to say just be all bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, rose-colored glasses in a very false, ephemeral way. I'm just saying, think about a situation and go, okay, what's the best that can happen? Because life has already shown, history has already proven that the worst that could happen
has happened.
It's happened, and I survived it, or I'm surviving it.
Right.
So if the worst happens, we'll deal with it. We'll figure it out.
So
And
I have an
anybody listening, if you feel alone, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I
No,
really
no,
want
go
to get
ahead.
this off my chest. If you feel alone, if you feel like I don't have anybody to turn to, understand I'm saying to you, I'm making a verbal contract with you right now. You message me and I will message you back. I promise you. So if you feel like you're going to do something alone, hit me up. I got you. So I'm sorry.
Absolutely. Oh, no, absolutely. Absolutely, Kuti. So one of the exercises that I do with my clients, and I do with myself, I almost daily, I call it the what if game.
Mhm.
So what if I did succeed? What if I did get the answers? What if this did turn out better than I thought? Right. And so you start changing your perspective if you start asking yourself, what if, what if, what if? And if you do it, do you know the 5 why questions?
I'd love to hear them.
Okay, so the 5 whys. And this is how you get to the root of your why.
Okay.
So why do you want to do this? Because I want to make a lot of money. Why do I want to make a lot of money? So that I can impact the world. Why do you want to impact the world? Because it needs to be better. Why does it need to be better? Spirituality is lacking. Spirituality is my why, right?
It's
Because
funny. That sounds like a conversation every day with my kid.
yeah, yes,
My kid was just, hey, look, why? Okay, why? Okay, why?
why, right?
Okay, why?
Why, right?
Okay, why?
Right. So you take the 5 whys and you change that to what if,
Mhm,
doing the same thing, right?
mhm.
And you get to the root, especially if you get your ego out of the way. If you don't get your ego out of the way, then you're going to go right back to the beginning. But when you do it yourself, no one's going to know. You
Right.
don't ever have to tell anyone what the result of this is, but be
Right.
honest. If not with everyone else, be honest with yourself. Learn to be honest with yourself, right? Because then the world can start to change because you're looking at it differently. And you're talking about, Kuti, you learned at a very young age that perspective is everything. And sometimes being a chameleon just simply means changing your perspective.
Precisely. I mean, I love it. I love it. That I'm taking that one with me.
Okay, take it.
But that's yeah, that's it. That's it. And again, doesn't mean everything's gonna be perfect or rosy, whatever the case may be. But again, your pain is there for a reason. You know, when I got people working out, fatigue and burn signifies something's happening, and there's no change for the better that I've seen anybody go through, whether we're talking about health or we're talking about education or we're talking about wealth, and whether we're talking about any of these kind of things that doesn't involve some level of change that you can actually feel, you know, a little burn that you got to push through. If it doesn't involve that, it will go just as quickly and easy and painlessly as it can.
Right, right. And so one of the other things that I do, oh my God, we could go on forever. So I'll just do this.
Let's do a part 2.
We'll do a part 2, because one of the things that I do with my clients is I have them experience fear, just a little fear
Mhm,
every day. What
mhm,
is it that you don't want to do? Go do it,
mhm.
right? Do something just a little, because when the big guy comes that scares the bejesus out of you, you've
Yep,
been practicing dealing with fear.
yep, yep.
And you can go, okay,
You
I know
can't
how to do
unsee
that.
that. Yeah,
I know
you
how to
can't
do that.
unsee it.
No,
You can't unsee it.
right,
Once you've seen that, you can't unsee it,
right,
nor should you. And sometimes you might. Sometimes you might get comfortable enough, and that's why I always remind people, bringing it back to what I was saying before. Stop for a second and think about that worst thing, because when you think, stop and really own the worst. I'm not trying to trigger people. So, but just the worst thing. It even going back to it is scary. But then as soon as you make those 2 contemplations that I had, you either survived it or are surviving it. And it's like, oh, well,
yep. That's the worst thing. And it's over there.
and
And I'm
it's
over
back there.
here.
Yeah, it's
Right.
back there.
Don't
I'm
bring
right
it into
here.
the present. Just like, wow, look at that.
Yep.
Right.
So in real time, what I always remind myself and others to do is to be present, to use the word you just used, to be present and be grateful for the things in the present. Practicing gratitude is something I've been doing for about the last year and a half, 2 years.
Oh, good.
And it's really been transformative. I forget about the stuff I don't have or don't want or don't like about my life when I'm abundantly thinking about the things I do have. And the wild part is my goal. I remember the person who pitched this to me was one of my clients who, his name is Howard Maneker. I got to give him a shout out because he's just
Hey, Howard.
a person. He's in a wheelchair and he's got a spinal injury and we've worked, but he's made tremendous progress, right? And he told me that he started off every day with 10 things he was grateful for. I was like, that's a lot, dude, every single day. So I just told myself and some people that I have like morning meditation with and prayer that let's just practice right now 5. Because I honestly didn't think I could do 10.
Oh, but
30,
you can,
30,
can't you?
30 little secret. I have never had a list shorter than 10. Once I get to 3, it just starts flowing. And this is every single day, even in the midst of some of the cruddiest life circumstances I have ever been in. I got a friend right now that is on his deathbed. And I saw him. And a lot of my career as a fitness professional, a lot of the touchstone moments, the touchstone accomplishments, the confidence with which I move in this space, I owe all to my experience with him. He's like a grandfather I've never had. And even in that, I've just told you 3 things that are amazing about him as I am parallel mourning the fact that any second I'm going to get a call that says he's not here.
So a dear friend of mine passed away a couple of years ago, and this is why I do the podcast that I do. That's a whole other story. And what I've learned is when someone dear to me transitions, I have 2 things that I'm very grateful for. I'm very grateful that they're not suffering in this third world crap that we're dealing with anymore, that they're free. And I'm so grateful that I hurt enough, that I had someone who loved me and I loved them enough, that there's a hole that
And
I
that's
have
what I
to
tell
fill.
people all the time, when it comes to processing grief, because I've had to do that. We all do as we get older. It's just what's going to happen. It's just
Right.
going to, and it doesn't get any less as we get older, right?
Right.
And so I started realizing was, if a person was passing away and you're just kind of like, that says a lot about who that person was or wasn't to you anyway,
Right.
or what kind of person that person was. So when you're hurt and touched by the fact that you will no longer have earthly access to this person, it means that that's how important they were. So after you give
Right.
yourself the requisite time to grieve and mourn, because that's human, right?
Right.
After you do that, what will happen is when the tears dry, you'll realize that very same reason that you're mourning for, why are you mourning? Do the 5 whys of the mourning, right? Why the reason you're mourning is actually such an awesome thing. And what I have purposed myself to do and what's helped me deal with losses as they start to pile up, in terms of, loss of life and friends and family members, is whatever that thing is that I'm missing the most, that makes me choke up the most, I try my best to add it to my character. So every time I reflect it and pass that forward. So with Doc, he just always was a great historian. He was somebody who always could come with a perspective that made you think differently about what you were talking about, but it was an educated perspective, and it always made you feel better about your circumstance. So every time I do something like that in conversation with somebody else who's trying to just figure life out like I was when I was talking to him, I'm paying him respect. His
Right.
legacy lives on. And the thing that I was mourning, I'm now paying forward in multiplicity.
Exactly. And so Kuti, yes, we will have to talk again.
Let's do it.
If people do want to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
The quickest way to find me is on Instagram at KUTIMACK. But you can also hit me up on Facebook. That's at BYBD Fitness. That's Be Your Best Daily Fitness. Or you can you can email me. You can email me at you can email me at bybd@me.com.
Fantastic. And all of this, by the way, it will be in the notes,
Okay.
so don't worry about it. So thank you so much, Kuti. This has been so much fun. Everybody, I certainly
do it
hope you
again.
enjoyed this as much as we did. This is Gail Craft from the Empowering Process podcast. If this interested you or caught your attention, leave us a little note. If you have a question, ask us. Maybe we'll get together and answer your question. If you know someone who actually could benefit from this conversation, share it out to them. And as always, please do subscribe, give us a thumbs up, let us know that you love it. We love you, Gail Craft, the Empowering Process Podcast. Thank you so much, Kuti. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Empowering Process Podcast. Be sure to visit Gail at gailcraft.com to learn more about how she serves thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and goal seekers. And remember, if you like this broadcast, be sure to share and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.